This slide is my title page, which reads Speculative Eco-Mothering, Mothering as a Response to the Anthropocene in Speculative and Ecofiction by Madison Myers, she, her, University of Denver, and includes an image of a girl and her mother walking along a dirt road through a field. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for viewing this virtual presentation. I'm going to begin with an overview of the major premises of the larger project from which I pull for this presentation. I'll then move into a rationale and explanation for how I'm defining and thinking about eco-mothering. And then I'll move into several examples and 2 longer case studies. Finally, I'll touch on implications and next steps. This slide includes 3 images. The first image on the left is a painted statue of a pregnant woman whose stomach is painted to resemble the earth. The top right image is a painting of a pregnant woman standing in front of a sun, and the bottom right image is of a mother holding her baby in a desert landscape. Environmental and social conditions within the Anthropocene create hierarchies that leave non-human species, the landscape, and vulnerable populations exponentially removed from power. Humans, alongside all species, face risk of environmental degradation within the Anthropocene that brings us to a point of no return and that ultimately threatens human and species survival. In fact, several works of fiction deal with these kinds of scenarios that detail apocalypse, society post-pandemics, post-running out of water, post-melting of the glacier ice caps, etc. Most of this fiction, often speculative ecofiction, invites readers to imagine one of many possible futures that could expound from our current trajectory of the Anthropocene. Knowing the current trajectory must change through radical means, technological as well as social. I propose that one approach several authors offer for radical change and imagining speculative departures from the Anthropocene, not necessarily the least damage done or the best outcome for humanity, is through their depictions of mothering and caretaking across species, races, cultures, generations, locations, etc. As part of an extended project that is working toward my dissertation, I am exploring the practice of mothering as depicted in speculative, postmodern, and contemporary North American ecofiction as a site of inquiry for the ways mothering responds to the Anthropocene, what I am terming eco-mothering. This larger project, though still in its early stages, has evolved into looking at mothering as an identity, as a practice, as it relates to the past, present, and future, and as it is affected by and responds to the several possibilities the future holds and what the Anthropocene makes a quite uncertain present. By looking at examples in fiction, I consider the ways overlapping and often contradictory definitions of human and multi-species mothering, biological, psychological, and sociological, contribute to multi-species community building. Interspecies community grounded in variability, interconnectedness, diversity, and complicated notions of species, to understand possibilities for envisioning mothering as a practice of caretaking within ecofiction and as a speculative departure from the Anthropocene. Speculative departures from the Anthropocene are productive, imaginative, and unprecedented ways of reconsidering human positionality and relationality within the Anthropocene, to each other, to the earth itself, and to other species, that consciously respond through action that hinges on community care and justice. I consider different aspects of mothering, multi-species and cross-species relationships, and speculative futurity, whether through futuristic, scientific intervention, post-apocalyptic envisioning, and reimagined possibilities that have retroactive and proactive implications for space and relationships, or fantastical and techno-futuristic embodiments. Ultimately, eco-mothering literature invites readers to reconsider their positionality within the Anthropocene and their normative assumptions about species hierarchy, community, and possibilities for caretaking across species. This slide includes a photograph of me and of my daughter, and we're both wearing pink sunglasses. As I mentioned in my introduction, the literary market is inundated with works of fiction that imagine possible futures, many apocalyptic in nature, pun intended. When I became pregnant last April at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, my perception about the present and the future completely changed. I could no longer ignore purposefully or inadvertently things I hadn't noticed before, as my body literally made space for a baby growing inside me. My thinking, my perceptions, my time, my present, and my future also made space for my baby. In Argonauts, Maggie Nelson describes the ways a baby literally makes space where there wasn't space before. And the ways mothering, motherhood make space are places of inquiry and possibility and speculative futures. They have also been spaces for my own inquiry. I couldn't help but notice the ways authors write mothers responding to the present and future, and equally the ways mothers and mothering are completely invisible, happened or happening, but not described or taken for granted. Other times, mothering appears as a palimpsest of the plot line or for significant character development. Mothers and mothering linger, make up the atmosphere, but aren't present in the driving action. Pregnancy and motherhood have been places that have allowed me to enter into deeper questions and anxieties I have about living in the Anthropocene, about moving into an uncertain future, not just myself, but a future that my daughter will one day inherit. The paper I'm sharing today details just a few of the works I've been considering as case studies: Gold Fame Citrus by Claire Vaye Watkins and Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich. Though I'll reference others as they relate to my larger questions and as examples of the extensive mothering that appears within the larger genres of ecofiction and speculative fiction. The bulk of this paper will briefly and broadly detail the two novels mentioned, specifically focusing on the ways each novel incorporates mothers responding to the present and speculative futures, apocalyptic futures, and the manner in which motherhood transforms the ways they perceive the past, present, future, and world around them. My purpose with this paper is not to draw any conclusions beyond noticing that mothers, mothering, and motherhood in ecofiction and speculative fiction perhaps are places to draw conclusions, and that at the very least as themes and possibly as a kind of subgenre. I'll start with a few select examples that deal directly with mothering that occurs visibly, palimpsestually, and purposefully invisible in action and on the page. This slide includes an illustration of a pregnant handmaid holding her belly with several other handmaids standing to her right. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is one such novel whose not so far off future is completely dictated by motherhood. Women are valuable for their abilities to literally make, house, and produce children within their bodies as handmaids, care for children as domestic servants, as Marthas, have the official title of mother of these children as wives. Each of these groups of women complicate the identity of mother, the role of mothering, the position of motherhood. We see very few instances of mothering in action within this society, though mothering is a driving force, permeates every action, encounter, and injustice. This slide includes 3 different covers of Dawn by Octavia Butler. The left cover is a series of hills with a woman's face emerging from a landscape vagina. The middle cover includes a woman scientist sealing a sleeping woman into a large plant. The right cover includes a woman surrounded by alien-like plants. In Octavia Butler's Dawn, Lilith embodies motherhood on multiple planes: mother of biological human child, mother of child in need and placed within her vicinity, arranged mother of Uloi alien child. What she understands as mother of awakened humans, she will teach to rebuild and repopulate the earth, mother to human Uloi hybrid fetus growing within her. Mothering here is multi-species and complicated. This slide includes a collage of objects covering the bottom half of a woman's face. Novels like Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11 completely erase mothering. Kirsten, the protagonist, is a child when the Georgia flu takes her mother and most of human civilization. In a future so different from the present we now know, in a future where her brother dies from getting his leg caught on a nail, she cannot remember her mother's face. Memories of her mother feel like dreams, and objects fill in the gaps and places of her mother's embrace, voice, and face. A paperweight, gossip magazines, a celebrity named Arthur Leander, Shakespeare productions, which she basically knows by heart. These items symbolize a world pre-pandemic, are symbolic gestures beyond survival in a world post-pandemic. In the void of mothering, care, love, protection, intuition, education, companionship. Objects, unconsequential pop culture, stage production, fill in the gap. This slide includes several durian fruits with one sliced open in the front. Larissa Lai's Saltfish Girl imagines reproductive possibilities for motherhood in queer, multi-species, technological ways. In a future juxtaposed against a folkloric past, the Human Genome Project is taken and manipulated to create slave labor in humans spliced with carp and cat DNA. Mothering, and motherhood here complicate age, heteronormativity, species, and technology. Motherhood is possible through consuming durian fruit, and Sonia's make up queer and multi-species relationships of motherhood and sisterhood as they reproduce to create a community of anarchy. Each of these novels detail possible futures that stem out of the present conditions of the Anthropocene. The societies of these speculative futures reconcile their relationships to the environment, often the land itself, and systems of power stem out of environmental conditions that have made the world no longer knowable as it is now. In these futures, birth rates have dropped, and the nuclear fallout has left much of the lands inhospitable, i.e., the colonies in The Handmaid's Tale, making it possible for a religious regime to take power. Or humans have destroyed the planet to the extent that they will be completely extinct unless an alien species steps in. Even so, Lilith sacrifices herself and her species for the Uloi's promise, insistence, of a better future, a future without humans, as the Uloi plan to genetically intertwine and repopulate Earth with human Uloi offspring. Or, much of humanity has been wiped out, which leads to all kinds of questions about survival in an environment where previous knowledge for living, surviving, and thriving is no longer applicable. Such conditions create ideal conditions for religious cults to colonize small towns. Or, GMOs have uncontrollable consequences. The unregulated zone decries the capitalistic workings of seemingly idyllic and utopian communities. And palace shoes prevent the rich from contracting the dreaming disease through the soles of their feet, demonstrating the grotesque powers of technology and capitalism, caricatures of the present. To be reductive, each of these novels depict humans living within societies made possible by human disrupted or destroyed environments, in environments no longer easily extractable or controllable. These novels are just a few of a larger body of fiction within both ecofiction and speculative fiction that consider the role of mothers, the act of mothering, and the function of motherhood in speculative futures. While novels such as Gold Fame Citrus and Future Home of the Living God look more closely at mothering in action and provoke from me more pointed questions about eco-mothering or mothering as an identity, as a practice, as it relates to the past, present, and future, as it affects, is affected by, and responds to the several possibilities of the future stemming out of the Anthropocene. In Gold Fame Citrus, Luz and Ray are two Californians trying to raise their unconventional family in a future where water is all but gone and California is inhospitable, at least according to the government. Luz is a former child actress model whose own birth was a kind of token for climate change prevention. Early in the novel, Luz reflects on her role as poster child for promises vague and anyway broken, born on the eve of some symbolic and controversial groundbreaking ceremony, delivered into the waiting blanks of a speech written for a long forgotten senator. Baby done, born with a golden shovel in her hand, adopted and co-opted by conservation and its enemies. Her milestones announced in press releases, her life literal and symbolic, the stuff of headlines. Throughout the novel, swimming pools repeatedly surface, once literally from out of the Armagosa, a large body of sand that has taken over the Mojave Desert and has a kind of mystic aura within the book. Most of them empty, as one newspaper recalls. This slide includes a photograph of an empty swimming pool with the quote, "Every swimming pool in California to be drained before baby Den is old enough to take swimming lessons," Watkins 11. Because the water in California is gone and the aquifer is completely dry. Due to the extreme water shortage, and because California, the land of gold, fame, and citrus, has become inhospitable to virtually all life, people are being evacuated and sent to refugee work camps across the country. In the midst of bartering several $100s for a small container of sour blueberries and drinking unlimited ration Coca-Cola to supplement the limited drinking water, an encounter with a child that thrusts Luz into a role of motherhood totally changes the trajectory of their lives. When Ray and Luz come across a toddler whom they call Ig with a group of druggies, the one who appears to be responsible for her they call the Nut. They believe something sinister is occurring, and Luz begs Ray to let her take the child to raise as their own. Though they have no experience with children, life quickly becomes centered around Ig, her needs, possibilities for her future, fitting the starlit scarves around Ig as makeshift diapers, placing duct tape over outlets, and cinching dry ration rice into a pocket of gauze to make what Ig instantly calls a nini for her to suck. Luz finds a list created by Ray of her life unwritten, including take Ig walking in the rainforest barefoot. Show her velvet moss and steady evergreens and the modest gibbous of glacier on Mount Rainier. Encourage her to stroke gently the fins of the underside of orange mushrooms. Pry open rotting logs and watch grubs and slugs and earthworms at their enrichment business. Let her take some of the sweet colloidal humus into her mouth. Return home where Ray must be stirring a big pot of chili and I must assemble a rainbow salad and Ig must set her dolls kindly on the redwood windowsill, all in a row. Eat dinner on a picnic table or on the porch Ray built, sipping from tall beaded glasses of ice water, watching orcas breach across the sound. Where they both had come together as proud Hoosiers, Mohabs, people who stay and refuse evacuation no matter how dire the situation. With Ig in their lives, they suddenly feel compelled to evacuate California and bring her to a place where she can have a happy, normal childhood of limitless possibilities. Possibilities tied to land, trees, and wildlife, only possible with water, largely reminiscent of a life pre-point of no return. In the way in which Luz details her and Ray's lives pre-Ig is relatively monotonous and void from purpose. However, once they kidnap Ig in what they consider an adoption, Luz's entire perception about the world, the future, and her role now as Ig's mother completely transforms, and it's from her perspective which we receive majority of the story. This slide includes a photograph of an abandoned bus in the middle of a desert landscape and the following quote. Luz describes trees that had once stood in the corners of the courtyard had been ripped up, which did not necessarily surprise her. Pretty much all trees in Santa Monica had been hacked down. Rather, it was the holes where the trees had been that unsettled Luz, dark, expectant as graves. There were never so many hazards in the world as there were today. Love made you see them all. Watkins 64. All of Luz's worries about the present and the future she now filters through her role as mother. Luz had too many worries to think of just one, but Ig was too delicate to resent, too pearly skinned to solve, and right now, stroking the tip of her nose with the tip of her nini, vastly too gentle, so much like a godsend. While Gold Fame Citrus provides dozen more examples for me to include, and there are several other avenues for me to pursue in my analysis about mothering within the novel, I include these examples here because they demonstrate an almost immediate transformation in the way Luz both perceives the world around her and also the future that awaits both her and Ig because of the mothering role she takes on. Motherhood allows and forces Luz to see the world differently, which Watkins then draws on and manipulates throughout the rest of the novel. Without giving too much of the story away, Luz's role as mother is complicated at best, and it certainly doesn't redeem her or resolve her personal and situational issues. However, motherhood does make possible a transformation in Luz that at the very least allows a changed perception toward the past, present, future, and world around her. J. Hicks Heather, in their article, Smoke Follows Beauty, the Femme Fatale and the Logic of the Apocalyptic Affiliation in Claire V. Watkins' Gold Fame Citrus, analyzes Luz's mothering role against her femme fatale role. They write, among Luz's bids to escape her weary sense of toxicity, the most obvious and protracted is her attempt to mother Ig. In taking the child, she grasps at a maternal status that promises to abate her dangerous self-absorption. Heather ultimately argues that Luz's mothering reveals the viscosity of the femme fatale persona, though it is only in moments of mothering that Luz has momentary breaks from this role ingrained and assigned to her. Even if, as Heather argues, Luz's relationship to Ig initially provides Luz hope of redemptive motherhood as a potential escape from the sterility of her role as femme fatale, and then it lays bare the poisonous genealogy of redemptive motherhood itself, while further binding Luz to connotations of barrenness and destruction. Motherhood does transform Luz, even if it does not redeem her. Not all stories have happy endings. Clearly this one doesn't, though happy and resolved endings don't feel appropriate or productive in the speculative future of Gold Fame Citrus. Perhaps nothing redemptive or what overwhelmingly positive occurs for Luz, but motherhood creates transformation that makes her different, see different, perceive different than she did before, which deserves further exploration and analysis. Future Home of the Living God details a speculative future where DNA has evolved so that creatures, including humans, born are molecularly different, throwing the world into chaos and making possible a takeover of the government by a religious regime to, among other things, capture and imprison all pregnant women. Cedar, the protagonist of the story, is 4 months pregnant when the world as she knows it collapses and becomes unrecognizable. The first sign of the world collapsing and what will eventually be revealed as the government seizing all news outlets, Cedar notices. This slide includes a photograph of several people, white women in center. One person holds an American flag and another holds a Jesus Saves sign and the following quote. The people who are reading the news are different. It seems that the people are all the same person. The women are fewer, the ones who appear seem awkward, all in their 20s, with white teeth, yellow or brown hair, sparkling eyes. The men are all white with white teeth, sharp jawlines, sparkling eyes. There are no brown people anywhere, not in movies, not in sitcoms, not on shopping channels, or on the dozens of evangelical channels up and down the remote. In this future, the human species as a whole is threatened by reverse evolution, and as chaos ensues, food becomes scarce, alcohol and cigarette becomes luxuries, and pregnant women are both a threat and the only possibility for maintaining the human species. Women are quickly subjugated for their ability to produce, and Erdrich juxtaposes women of color violently controlled by what becomes a fusion of hyper-white church and state. Possibilities for the future are unprecedented biologically and socially due to this ecological genetic variation. While Erdrich does not trace where this genetic disruption originated, it feels eerily similar to GMOs, technology arising out of the Anthropocene, and gene-spliced creatures that science quickly lost control over, such as the pigoons and rakunks of Margaret Atwood's works and Crake. As both a native and pregnant woman in this quickly devolved future society, Cedar's ability to live freely is directly threatened by uncontrollable environmental and social factors and mediated through her pregnancy and motherhood role to her unborn child. Her perception of the present and of the future is filtered through the baby she carries, even though, especially though, she doesn't know whether her unborn child is human or genetically varied. In fact, The entire story, as it is told to us as diary entries, is crafted by Cedar to record the present as history for her unborn child. To her child, she writes. This slide includes an illustration of a fetus with neurons lighting up its brain and the following quote. What is happening involves the invisible, the quanta of which we are created. Whatever is actually occurring, there is constant breaking news about how it will be handled. Speculation, really, concerning what comes next, which is why I am writing an account. Historic times. There have always been letters and diaries written in times of tumult and discovered later, and my thought is that I could be writing one of those. And even though I realize that all lexical knowledge may be useless, you'll have this record. Did I mention that I'm 4 months pregnant with you? Erdrich 3. Intuitively feeling that the baby is a boy, she writes to him, and she takes in the present and tries not to, but often ends up speculating about the future. Motherhood instills a need in Cedar to reconcile the past, present, and future. Because of her pregnancy, she seeks out her biological parents, which then brings together her biological and adoptive parents. And it is through her pregnancy that she tethers herself to the present. Motherhood, the role of mother that develops through Cedar's pregnancy, is a beacon that brings together past, present, and future. We repeatedly get reflections on past, present, and future combined, and in a conjunction of the three, past through childhood, present, all the more pertinent as a pregnant evadee of the state, and future, uncertain and unprecedented socially and biologically. Cedar notices, the street is without electricity. The whole neighborhood has lost power. My graceful childhood street has the stillness of an ancient dream, the muted perfection of a before-disaster photograph. I try to shake off this disquiet, but all the way back along the calm, empty South Minneapolis streets, I feel that, instead of the past, it is the future that haunts us now. Again, Future Home of the Living God is a text rich with examples and avenues for me to pursue regarding mothering, especially as multi-species and across races, cultures, generations, locations, etc. But I include these examples because motherhood clearly alters the ways in which Cedar perceives the world around her, in the past, the present, and the future, and then responds. Everything Cedar does, the choices she makes, the sacrifices she makes, the risks she takes, are all influenced by her role as mother. While Future Home of the Living God has an ending equally unhappy, Cedar perhaps experiences more positive implications of her transformation and continues to make connections between past, present, and future through the birth of her child and hope she places on her son, wherever he is. Sylvia Martinez Faquina, in her article, Louise Erdrich's Future Home of the Living God, Uncertainty, Proleptic Mourning, and Relationality in Native Dystopia, discusses the ending as evidence of Cedar's new hybrid relational set of beliefs, showing resonances of transcendentalism, another intertext of transformation and transcendence. She argues, Cedar's creation of a new human being connects both mother and baby to nature, the universe, and God. As her baby grows inside her, she becomes more aware of the reciprocity of body and soul. And when she finally holds him in her arms, she writes, I looked into the soul of the world. In spite of uncertainty, danger, and betrayal, Cedar finds joy in the integrative power of motherhood and loves the world. Every fresh new cell of blood, every icy flash of neuron, I love you, a love of everything. In another condensing of past, present, and future, we learn her son is the angelic presence who sits at the end of her bed and comforts her leading up to his birth. And Martinez Falquina suggests that Cedar's baby, wherever he might be after being taken from his mother, will survive and become the living God of the future. The novel ends with her writing to him, I am here and I was there, and I have wondered ever since your birth, where will you be, my darling, the last time it snows on earth? Even though her baby is taken by the state and she is held prisoner to use her body to procreate additional human children from frozen embryos, the way in which Cedar views the past, present, and future and world around her is completely transformed by the birth of her son. This slide includes an illustration of a tree One side is dead and surrounded by dry, cracked ground and factories. The right side is green and lush. What I've attempted to demonstrate through my extended analysis of gold-famed citrus and Future Home of the Living God, as well as the several texts I referenced both before both of these, is that there is a robust body of literature that incorporates mothers in the throes of motherhood, mothering in speculative futures stemming out of the current trajectory of the Anthropocene. These mothers respond to the world around them, to their environments, to their societies, inextricably through their roles as mothers and the implications these roles bring externally. Whether motherhood and mothering adds any virtue, offers any kind of redemption, reveals paths towards salvation from their situations, etc., is not necessarily my concern, but rather that motherhood creates transformation in the first place, that they are different, see different, perceive different than they did before. What this transformation offers, the specific implications of this transformation, is one aspect I'm still working through as part of my larger project. The direction I anticipate my project taking me is that eco-mothering literature invites readers to reconsider their positionalities within the Anthropocene and their normative assumptions about species hierarchy, community, and possibilities for caretaking. As I mentioned before moving into the several examples of texts that incorporate mothers, motherhood, and mothering in speculative futures stemming out of the Anthropocene, mothering in ecofiction and speculative fiction is a pattern frequent enough that it's worthy of notice and analysis. Part of my larger project is determining whether I'm analyzing a common theme, eco-mothering, across several texts, or making a case for eco-mothering as a subgenre within ecofiction and speculative fiction, and the nuances that come from making this distinction. And an integral part of this project that is largely absent from this presentation is inserting my own experience and positionality as person, mother, scholar, and living writer within and responding to the Anthropocene, as I've been considering and examining this fiction alongside my own subjective experience. Through my hybrid personal narrative and critical analysis, I seek to make visible my embodied experience and explore the ways such positionality is not something simply to note, but rather a resource from which I can draw my inquiry and research. This slides include my headshot and the following text. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate any questions, thoughts, and/or suggestions you have to share. madisonmyers@du.edu is my email address. Thank you again.